Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens for your Leeds United update show, talking all of the latest and greatest Leeds United news. So we've got a story coming in from basically everywhere, but I think it started actually from the Daily Mail, but even the Edinburgh Evening News reporters now covered this as well. It's essentially a Hibernian midfielder called Joe Mulligan. So talking about him, could Leeds United bring him in? Forest are also interested, but Leeds United are pursuing the services of him, so talking about that. We're also as well going to talk a bit about the idea and when Carragher basically wasn't banging Salah's drum yesterday and insulting Salah, is that fair? Or bashing Salah and calling him all sorts of names. Well, he wasn't doing that anyway. He did actually have a bit of time to talk a bit about Leeds United as well. So we'll talk about what he's been saying actually, because some really interesting quotes actually from Carragher, potentially different to what some of you guys think in the chat, some different to what I think in the chat. So we'll go through what he said and we'll digest and we'll see what we think. We'll decide if we actually agree with it or sort of some of it that we don't agree with as well. So quite a nice bit of stuff to talk about today. But we'll start, as you can see, with him on the right-hand side of the screen there. We will start with Joe Mulligan. So this, as I said, this came in from the Edinburgh Evening News, and it also came in from a Daily Mail report as well. And it says that Leeds United and Nottingham Forest have made initial inquiries for Joe Mulligan, and he's a 23-year-old midfielder, plays for Hibernian. And if you want a bit of a player profile, apparently from what I've read, he is very similar in a profile to the likes of John McGinn, who of course has had a fantastic year in the Premier League and been a really staple of Aston Villa's team in the Premier League for a long period of time now. Obviously joined Villa when they're in the Championship, but has a fantastic time at Villa. And apparently he's someone similar. And I think actually when you look at the attributes, apparently that is something you can look at, and they are quite similar profiles apparently. So definitely something to consider. This season, if anyone's interested, 21 appearances, 3 goals and 2 assists. And apparently, he obviously played fantastically well at the weekend as well. But interesting to note, as I said at the start, Forest are monitoring the service as well. Apparently, they seem a bit of Elliot Anderson replacement, because we know at Forest, obviously, Elliot Anderson is looking to move on now. I think there's loads of clubs interested. Manchester United, I think Liverpool are looking. I think Man City as well are sniffing around Elliot Anderson as well. I think even potentially Arsenal there. Loads of clubs anyway are interested in Elliot Anderson. Obviously, he's a fantastic player, as we well know. And they're seeing him as the replacement. And actually, because of that, they're a bit further down the line with this deal than Leeds United are. In terms of if Leeds United actually could do this in January, the report does state that Hibernian, although don't want to sell the player, obviously with him playing in the Scottish League, and I think this is sort of understandable for all Scottish teams, with him playing in the Scottish League, potentially, if a suitable offer does come in, Hibernian will listen to offers for Joe Mulligan. Doesn't talk about the price region. I would imagine maybe between 10 to 15 million pounds for him. I think the main question around this story is this where we want to go with our money? I've seen a lot of people online actually say that actually, yes, this would be a really good addition for Leeds United, and yes, this is the sort of profile we need. We need maybe another box-to-box midfield player, which I get to an extent. But when I'm looking at priorities in the team, personally, I'm not quite there with this as a personal priority. Like, I look at our midfield options. We've got Longstaff, we've got Stack, we've got Tanaka, we've got Ampadu, and we've got Gruev. We've got 5 there. Now, obviously, I don't think Gruev's quite good enough. I think all 4 of the rest of them, for me, are pretty good. In my personal opinion, I think they're all pretty decent options outside of Gruev. I think they can all fundamentally start in the Premier League, all 4 of them. And I think actually when you see in the last few weeks, Stack, Tanaka, and Ampadu, we've talked about how brilliant that midfield 3 has been. So actually when we're looking at, obviously we know Leeds United are working on a limited budget, is this actually where we want to put the budget into another midfield player, when I think actually we've got good options in the midfield? Yes, look, in every position, like always, we want depth everywhere. Of course, you want as much depth as possible. But and if we had an unlimited budget, I'd be all over this signing. But when I look at where Leeds United's priorities are, I'm still looking at the wing-back role as a real priority. I think a left wing-back, ideally, obviously with James Justin being right-footed, a left wing-back being a real priority for me. I still think as well a physical striker, and I've talked about this for the last few days now, and I will bash you some in the face. We have got, for me, Nemecha and DCL, and when we play at 2 up front, they work fantastically well together, like we saw in the Chelsea game. But as soon as one of them 2 are missing, we miss the profile, and I don't think we've got another profile in the Leeds United squad who actually can fit that profile in the same way and sort of support the rest of the team in the same way, with them 2 up front with the big presence and obviously being able to hold the ball up and everything that them 2 bring. Okafor tried that role. I don't think it worked. Peros tried that role in the past. Hasn't worked. A la Arsenal away. A la even in that game at the weekend when he wasn't able to do it. So For me, I've talked about obviously we need to have sales in the attack, maybe move a Joe Pro on. But also, as I said, when we're looking at priorities and we're looking at a limited budget, is the place to go, in my opinion, another midfield player? Probably not. And as I said, this is not me saying I don't want this player. This is not me saying that that a midfielder isn't necessary at some point. It's just an immediate priority at this moment in time. Is a central midfield player needed, in my personal opinion? What's actually interesting though is when I obviously read into this story a bit further on. The YEP obviously covered this story in quite a bit of detail, and they actually said something which I haven't seen reported by some people, but they actually said that Leeds United are obviously open to doing signings in the January transfer window. I think this is apparent now. I think we are seeing us Leeds United linked to a lot more players. Obviously, we had the player from Como last night that we talked about, and there is now an understanding for me that players are going to come into this football club in the January window and stuff, and there is going to be movement in the January window. Obviously, we heard in the summer from Robbie Evans that wasn't going to happen. It's pretty obvious it is going to happen. I also see a few comments coming in as well. I'll read them in a second. Jack does say evening, Scott, so evening to you too, Jack. But yeah, for me, as I said, I'm looking at now, and there's definitely going to be movement in the January transfer window, and there has to be movement in the January transfer window. I almost think, I know they obviously, the 49ers rated their summer at a really high level. I think they rate a 7 out of 10 or something like that. I think they did. I remember them talking on the Square Ball, talking about what the 49ers rated the summer. I'm pretty sure they rated it quite highly. And I actually think they thought that this squad would be good enough to survive without any January recruitment. And I think they've potentially been surprised at the level that this squad's actually at. And I'm surprised at that because I thought that it would be quite apparent that we didn't have enough quality to be like a really decent mid-table team. So the fact that they weren't going to look at January deals and now they are going to look at January deals is a positive for me, but I'm still not. I'm a bit surprised that they weren't going to do that in the summer anyway, to be honest. But obviously, it's looking like they are doing now. And obviously, as I said, we were linked to the Como player. Now we've been linked today. What it does say as well in the YEP report is that if they're looking at what they expect the 49ers to go for or the club to go for in the January window, they did say, the YEP did say a right winger, a creative right winger is a priority for Leeds United, and that's a position. Now, obviously, it did mention in the report as well that could change now with this sort of 3-5-2 going in. I always talked about, and if you guys have been watching for a while, which I know a lot of you have, I talked a while ago about the fact, in my opinion, that that we needed a creative right winger. But that was obviously when we're playing a 4-3-3. In Leeds United, in a 4-3-3 system, in my personal opinion, the number one priority position in the whole team is a creative right winger. I always talked, as I said weeks ago, about the fact that Harry Wilson was such a bad miss from Leeds United, and we needed to get that deal over the line, and that's been real costly. And obviously, he's having a fantastic season. He's got a brilliant goal at the weekend as well. And I still think if we are going to use the 4-3 at times, which I think we are, I don't think we're now just going to be set on a 3-5-2, and that is going to be that. I think we will see us adapting to in a 4-3 at times, because we've still got like Fulham to play at home, we've still got Burnley to play at home, we've still got Wolves to play at home, Brentford to play at home. All these teams when we play at home, and we're going to want to set up in a sort of in a park the bus system, 5-back, going long, having 30% of the ball at home to say Burnley. Are we going to want to do that? Probably not. So we're going to have to at some point revert to a 4-3-3. And in them sort of games, we are going to need for me a creative right winger. I know Nonto can potentially do a job out there, but I've never liked him that much on the right. I've always felt he's better on the left. And Dan James has been in and out of the team as well. So if we are playing a 4-3, which at points we are going to, for me, again, a right wing is important. We've talked about a number 9. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we can, again, put the funds towards this, but a goalkeeper I would like the idea of as well. I really would like the idea of a goalkeeper. I think that's something that Leeds United maybe going to have to look at in the summer now. But Perry's not. Maybe you judge Perry to the end of the season and then you look at it then. But he's not quite settled in the way that I thought he might have done, to be honest. So they're sort of the main positions I'm looking at this moment in time, and I'm not really as much looking at midfielder. Anyway, I'll get into your guys' comments. Rich says, I think Hibs picked him up on a free in the summer. Yeah, they did, mate. They did. Which I suppose is how it is. Sometimes you miss, sometimes you get. It is what it is. But if we bring another mid, it means Ampadu could drop into the defence if needed. So it helps us in a centre-back position too. We 100% need a striker, though, given how injury-prone some of our players are. Yeah, I agree with that. The only thing I don't agree with, mate, is if you're going to say, well, we could buy a midfielder so Ampadu could play centre-back, I'd rather just keep Ampadu midfield and buy another defender, if that makes sense. I'd rather do it that way than do the other way. And I actually think we don't, like, look, and as I said, this is the same with the midfielders. Another centre-back will be fantastic, and I would like another centre-back to come into the club, especially when we're playing a back 3. But Bornau should be slotting into a back 3, in my opinion. I know people are going to sort of probably scream at the camera when I say that, or scream at the telly when I say that. I do we bought Bornell for a reason. For me, he's someone that's going to have to be a slot in the back three. Also, we know James Justin can slot in a back three as well. Obviously, at times, if we can put Ampadu there as well with the midfield we've got, especially when Longstaff comes back. So there is possibilities, in my opinion. So I wouldn't be prioritising the centre half. But if we do feel like we need cover at centre back, I'd rather just buy a centre back than pop Ampadu in there, if that makes sense. Because I also think Ampadu's doing quite well in midfield too. Ollie says, I'd still love Gustavo Hamer. Yeah, I'd like him, mate. I've always liked Hamer, actually. And I think he's an interesting player to bring up, actually. But I've always liked the idea of Hamer because I think he offers two different things. Like, I think what I like with Hamer is I think he can sort of play in that advanced 8 role, which I think Leeds United want to use, even in a 4-3-3 or in a 3-5-2. I think both systems suit a Gustavo Hamer because he actually does work hard off the ball and he does his defensive work. You always find, actually, with the number 10s, usually, in my opinion, the sort of players usually who don't do that well off the ball and they're not that. And yes, they offer a lot on the ball, but actually off the ball, they're usually quite rubbish. Whereas one thing that Gustavo Hamer offers for me is he offers the quality going forward, and he can see that extra pass, and he's got that quality. But he also offers the defensive work as well, and he actually is quite a hard-working player. I know people talk about his weight all the time, but he is a hard-working player in terms of his numbers. He always has been. So for me, I've always liked the idea of Hamer, mate. I agree. Leeds are top of the list for injuries this season, which is worrying. I didn't know that, mate. Is that true? Surely Arsenal somewhere near, though. Arsenal, sure, they've picked up loads of injuries. I think the thing with Arsenal compared to Leeds is, except like James, we haven't had a lot of really, really long-term injuries. Obviously, Longstaff's out for a while now, but it's not been like ACLs and stuff that I think other clubs have had. Like we've had like 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, which I think with the sort of players you've got with the likes of Nemecha, the likes of Okafor, you are going to get these sort of constant 2-week injuries where that, because that's what they are, because they've got sort of in a roundabout way, dodgy limbs that do break down. Arsenal second, now they mate, yeah. Franculio, yeah, he's the striker we talked about a few weeks ago, mate. I'd love him, but he looks like he's linked to everyone under the sun. So I am, unfortunately, as much as I'd like him, and I think he sounds really exciting. One, he looks like he's going to be about 30 million quid. Which I don't think we've got for one particular position. Maybe we've got a 30 million budget overall. I'm not saying that, but from what we're reading, maybe it's going to be in and around that. But I don't think we blast it all in one player. Although potentially, do you look at it and go, do you look at sort of Franculio and go, he's good enough to the point where we could sacrifice other positions because if we get him, he'll shoot us back into the division. So I don't know, or keep us in the division. Nonto was just under 2 months. Yeah, he was, mate. You're right, yeah. So there was a few more, actually. I just couldn't think of it. Anyway, let's move on to a bit of Jamie Carragher. As I said, he spent a lot of time yesterday, a whole 9-minute rant on Mo Salah, and obviously he was disgraced by that. Which, to be fair, I wouldn't like it if I was a Leeds fan. And obviously a Leeds player had done that. We know players have done that in the past at Leeds, and I wouldn't like that either. But he obviously had a lot to say about Salah. But he did have a bit of time to talk about Leeds, so we'll just get into that. But I'll get into Rich's comment now. Promised David would be a good for our system. He's a big unit, 6'5". I think he might have been taller, man. I think he might be 6'7". But regardless, obviously he's playing at USG and he's having quite a good season. Yeah, he could be quite interesting. I still think we can get into the loan market though. I really do. There's got to be loans for us that we can maybe bring in that could be an offer for us. But that's another thing we've got to do. We've got to spend and we've got to sell and we've got to look at loan players because we've been decent at buying so far, the 49ers. I think we've been pretty bad at doing loans and I think we've been pretty bad at selling players. So they're two things that definitely have to improve going forward. Anyway, let's move on to what Jamie Carragher said then. So, the first thing that Jamie Carragher said, people, which you're not going to... So I know a lot of you, I know the chat, I know this chat well now. A lot of you are not going to like this, but he actually started out by doing a bit of praise for Daniel Farke. He talked quite highly of Daniel Farke, actually. He said, the upturning form for Leeds United is a lot down to the manager. Now, I know a lot of you won't like this. I think people will understand it in terms of, well, he was managing badly, and now he's managing okay. So, yes, he is the manager in that sense. But I think what Carragher's actually saying is that this, and he basically went on to say this, is that this team is not good enough to stay in the division, and it's going to rely on unbelievable tactical management throughout, basically, is the way he was going. He said that we basically ain't got enough quality. I'll get onto the quote now. Where is it? There's another quote. Where is it? Leeds don't have the same quality as a mid-table Premier League team, is what he said, as was one of the comments. But he basically said that Daniel Farke's change with 3-5-2 has been really impressive, and actually that he's managing really well at this moment in time. He also said that Leeds were the the Championship's best side who play with the best football, but the Premier League has, forced evolution and Farke has adapted. So he's talked about the actual Farke adaptation and the benefit of that. Now, again, not a lot of you are going to agree with this. And I think what's to bear in mind with this is that, and I do think this with pundits in general, I actually think Carragher is not one of the worst ones, and I don't think actually Neville is one of the worst ones. But I do think naturally, obviously, Gary Neville and Carragher both are a top 6 club sort of supporters, and I do think for the most part, maybe don't get offended too much if you are a top 6 club supporter, but I do feel like a lot of the time, a lot of the pundits in the country don't know that much about the relegation battle. They've said stuff in the past where, like, I remember once Carragher saying do you remember when the season, obviously, we sold Rafinha, sold Phillips, we actually got relegated that season, so it was a bad summer. But we actually bought quite a few players that summer. I think we bought about 6 or 7 players. And Carragher said in the summer, we sold Rafinha, we sold Phillips, and we brought nobody in. And when he said that, I was just like, yeah, you just don't know about the lower level, which is fine. Like, it's just that they just don't know about the lower league. So I think you've got to take what he says with a pinch of salt. But it is interesting in terms of how much they actually know about it. But he did say that he did basically sort of talk really well of Daniel Farke. Ollie on Tor says, unpopular opinion, but I actually really like Carragher and Neville. I actually do really like them as well. I think I like them. I'm not a massive fan of co-commentary on them, but I remember listening to something recently about co-commentary, and they said that look, it's really difficult co-commentary, but I never think they're that good at that. But I think actually as pundits, I do actually really like them. I find them really entertaining. And I actually think in terms of the top clubs, I think they're fantastic. I just sometimes... Look, naturally, I'm not going to be as knowledgeable about Arsenal as probably they are, because they watch Arsenal a lot more. They're much more inclined. I probably know a lot more about the relegation battle because my club's down here. So I'm not blaming for it, but I think you've got to say some of it with a pinch of salt naturally because of where they're at. Do you think players like Jack Harrison go out on loan, or Leeds try to sell him to maybe buy, maybe get another winger because Perot in for another striker? Would I try and get rid of Jack Harrison or get him out on loan? I think Jack Harrison, Rich makes a really interesting comment actually straight back to this, saying Harrison is on 90,000 a week. He'd be very difficult to shift unless we were going to pay a chunk of them wages. Yeah, I agree with this. My opinion on Harrison is that I agree with Rich. I in an ideal world, in a perfect world, if you could get rid of Jack Harrison, do it. If you're going to send him out on loan to another Premier League club or potentially a Championship club and pay 50% of his wages, probably more than that, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. You might as well just keep him. So for me, at this moment in time, I think we gave him a bad contract. We shouldn't have given him that contract. We actually should have sold him in that January transfer window when Leicester were knocking. But now we've got him, I think we're better just having him, because at times we are going to get injuries and he might even have to play at points. Because like even at this moment in time, like, if Goodmanson went down injured and Bogue went down injured and you want to play a wing-back system, obviously Justin would cover one wing-back system, but your probably next best option, actually, with the current squad, for the left wing-back would actually probably be Jack Harrison. For that reason, I'd just probably keep him around. But I know what you guys mean. And look, Jack Harrison's not a favourite, obviously. He snaked Leeds United when we got relegated, went to Everton for a few years. He's not a particularly good player anyway. So, look, people are not going to like Harrison, and that's totally understandable. But yeah, I think that's the situation with Harrison. I'd probably just keep him, to be honest. I really would. I do think, actually, to be fair to him, I don't think he's a good player. And I think he's quite a poor player, if anything. But I do think it's not like he doesn't try. Like, I can't stand some players sometimes when I felt like, and I think we've had these players over maybe the last decade who feel like they're not even trying at Leeds. I've always felt with Harrison, to be fair to him, he is someone that puts a shift in and he will try. He's just not at the level. It's like Brendan Aaronson's the same. I think they're both the same, really, in that sense. They're both just not good enough. Anyway, let's move on to some other things that Carragher said as well. He also said that he also basically, when he talked about it, suggested that the goal that Tanaka scores, and this is probably a bit more Liverpool related, but he said that the goal that Tanaka scored at the weekend, yes, it was a good goal for Leeds United, but he shouldn't have been left in 4.7 yards of space. And it's the most amount of space a player has been left into to score a goal this season. One thing that I actually want to talk about, though, with set pieces is that, and I don't think there's been enough credit for this, our set pieces at this moment in time are brilliant. We are currently second in the division for set pieces. Only actually Scum have actually scored more than we have. And I actually think now, especially when you're playing that 3-5-2, we are an absolute man. We've got man mountains in the box, and we should end the season with one of the best rates for set pieces. And I think with where the league's going, and we know obviously set pieces are huge in this division at this moment in time. The fact that Leeds United are really, really good on set pieces at this moment in time is a huge, huge positive. It really is. And that's something that we cannot understate. And if there's going to be something that keeps us up in this division, obviously we knew in the Championship how poor we were from set pieces. Now we felt like we lost almost maybe 5-10% because of the lack of set pieces and the lack of quality that we put into set pieces. But we are now gaining that extra 5-10%. And I think Fark and his coaching staff deserve a lot of credit. I know, obviously, now we've got taller players, and obviously having bigger players on the pitch naturally makes it easier on set pieces, obviously. But I think it can't be understated, actually, that we've clearly worked on set pieces, and we're seeing the dividends. I mean, in the last 2 games, we've scored 2 set pieces in both games, 2 corners, actually. And it's a huge positive for Leeds. And we actually look now. And again, I don't know what you guys think about this, but I actually feel like now, when we get a corner, it actually really excites me because I feel like we've actually got a really good chance to score a goal. Like every time we get a corner, and by the way, this is not just a me thing. I think when I've talked to other people as well, obviously who are also Leeds fans, they feel the same. And what it's now doing actually, because we actually feel like we're going to score a set piece now when we get one, the whole of Elland Road, when we get a corner, lifts like hell. And that in itself is a huge advantage. So this is the set pieces, especially with the way the league's going at this moment in time, which we've talked about consistently on this channel, about the fact it's gone to a more physical style, more set pieces are involved. I think it's really favouring us at this moment in time, and I think it's a real positive for us, our set pieces. And as I said, it's been rewarded now as we're second top scorers in the division for set pieces, which is really, really good. Rich says, some of the wages are... we are paying a nuts. Bornow is on 60 a week too. Is it? I didn't know he was on that much. Sometimes, mate, when you see it online, like some of these sites are garbage. Like they're not always on that. Like I've heard some professional footballers talk about in the past where obviously there's loads of sites that talk about wages of players. They're not always bang on, mate. But if that is true, I feel like I doubt he'd be on 60 a week. But if he is, then that is ridiculous, isn't it, really? He also went on to say to Jamie Carragher as well. He said... I think he was basically going on the line of that, look, we've obviously changed to a 3-5-2, and it's something I've actually said on this channel as well. But he basically said that the 3-5-2 doesn't solve everything. So it's solving stuff at this moment in time, but eventually Leeds are going to have to find a way other than the 3-5-2, and they're going to have to individual match plans, which we've talked about, obviously, to get the best out of this team. And obviously, and I agree with this. Like I've felt for a while now that the 3-5-2 has been definitely a beneficiary to Leeds United. And it's definitely worked really well in our favour, especially in the last few games, of course. I do feel with it, though, that it's more about the principles of how you play the 3-5-2 as the 3-5-2 itself. Like, I think some of our best performances this season have actually not been in the 3-5-2, but it's when we follow the principles that work for this Leeds United team. It's when we go long. It's when we pick the big man. It's when we, as I said, bypass that midfield. Because unfortunately for me, and I've talked about this loads again on the channel as well, we are so bad at playing the ball through the midfield. We can't do it. Our players are just not good enough on the ball to play through the midfield. So bypassing the press has been a real positive for us. And obviously we've got Nemetra and DCL up there as well, who are really good at making the ball stick, which again plays into our hands, and it creates a much more sort of game full of duels, which I think, again, a physical game, which benefits Leeds United as well. So, as I said, the 3-5-2 it's been a fix for Leeds United, as Carragher said, and it's worked for us, but it's not, as he also says, it's not going to solve everything, and we are going to have to adapt from that at times, which obviously we did in the Liverpool game, and I think we have to do that moving forward as well. I don't think this is a full solution. Having said all that, though, I still would play it in the Brentford game. And I think that's where we'll leave it today, people. A bit of a shorter episode. Obviously, the reason we're at 7 today is because of the Champions League football, and it will be 7 p.m. tomorrow, so don't miss it. That's the time we'll be doing it. But I hope you've enjoyed the show, as always. And if you could drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And there is this hype button as well, if you could do that as well. It didn't always pop up, but if you can, brilliant. And I'll see you all later for some more Leeds United news. As I said, 7 p.m. as well, because it is Champions League week.